Different story. In fact, it's also about a police force, but this is about Lancashire Police Force, which has been heavily criticised for releasing sensitive information about Nicola Bulley's private life. And it is said that they made a litany of errors in their handling of her disappearance. You'll remember that the 45-year-old went missing in January while walking her dog alongside the River Wyre. Her body was found in the water 3 weeks later, and an inquest found that she died after accidentally falling into the cold water. An independent report concluded that officers should have publicly said that Nicola was considered high risk from the start and released more information to counter the narrative that something suspicious had happened.
One of the decisions which has arguably the most significant impact on public confidence was the release of personal information about Nicola's health. We found that due process was followed in this decision and that it was lawful, but we are in no doubt that releasing this information in the manner the constabulary did was both avoidable and unnecessary.
Joining us now is investigative journalist Mark Williams-Thomas. Mark, thank you very much indeed for joining us. I think we remember, all of us, when police released information very personal to Nicola Bulley, information that she had been battling alcoholism, information that she was menopausal, information that felt like an invasion of a woman's or any citizen's privacy. And I remember as we heard it breaking on news bulletins, many of us questioned it then and there and just thought, why are they telling us this? What is this relevant for? Why is this something that should be in the public domain? So as an investigative journalist focused on this case, what did you make of it when it happened? And what is the thought about that subsequently?
It was shocking. I covered it at the time. Actually, I went up and spoke with both Paul, so Nicola's partner, and the rest of the extended family and friends. And actually, it was them that asked me for my help to work with them to try and make sure that really a message was getting out. What happened here is that the Lancashire police really failed right from the very beginning to treat this as a critical incident. That was identified by the College of Policing in their review. But they also mishandled the whole of the management of the police. So the media process, they failed to give the correct information out. In fact, at the first press conference that they were asked, the superintendent was asked, were there any matters in Nicola's life that could cause any problems, lead to her disappearing, any vulnerability aspects? And they said, no, absolutely not, categorically not. And then, of course, we have this very bizarre press conference where the superintendent then releases that actually there was something in her life. And then they added to it later by releasing the information you just alluded to, which was around the menopausal and drinking. Totally unnecessary, didn't need to be put out there. And in fact, had they dealt with it right on day one, this would not have escalated to the way that it was. Because what you had is you had a situation where it became really bizarre. How did she end up just vanishing? Whereas if they put some context to it right from day one, I don't believe this would have picked up the media trail and the high profileness that it did. So a damning report today by the College of Policing against Lancashire Police. It's really sad. With the 21st century, you would have expected by now policing to have learned the many lessons over the years. Sadly, it hasn't. We've got to a situation where information was released, which should never have been released, really personal stuff. Yes. And it's not just the impact that it has on Nicola, but of course, it's the impact that it has on the family. She's got children, and as they grow up, of course, what we know about press coverage is that it stays for perpetuity. It's there forever online.
Absolutely. One of the very strange facets of this case, Mark, as I'm sure people will remember, was that because the information given was so piecemeal and so, you might say, peculiar, or you might say so incompetent, or just so misleading and strange, people, ordinary people who were just watching it on telly or listening to it on the radio, seemed to believe that they could come, hire a canoe or walk about the place and find out what had happened themselves. And I'm not aware of any previous case where members of the public have literally got up off the sofa, walked out the door, gone to the scene and tried to solve what they thought was a mystery themselves. People wondered at the time whether there was some kind of strange blending of fact and fiction, or whether people had watched too many crime movies, or just what on earth had happened. Is it thought now that the way that the police handled it, particularly the way in which they let information trickle out and the way in which they informed the media, contributed to this completely bizarre bizarre behaviour on the part of members of the public?
I think it did. And in fact, I was at the National Police Conference last week talking on a panel. We were due to talk about the Nicola Bulley case, but the report wasn't out, so we didn't. We talked in general terms about the media. And one of the things that was very clearly came out of that was the way that the police handle critical incidents, the way that sometimes they're just not prepared. They don't have the knowledge and understanding of how critical time mass media work. And we're in another world now, gone are the days 10, 15 years ago, when I was in the police service, but of course now as a journalist, and you've been in the world of journalism for a very long time, we've got completely different rules and we've got completely different media outlets now. Gone are the days where you've got one or two. We've now got not just broadcast media, but we've got social media, we've got the internet. And what that does is it creates the journalists in a very different form. Some of those are very straight and very honest, but we've also got members of the public who want to kind of be the Miss Marples, and they want to go and solve it. They want to turn up at a crime scene. And what the police were criticised, Lancashire police were criticised at, was not being able to separate those who are effective journalists who are performing a role with those members of the public. And they gave them both access to the same amount of information. They also weren't clear in terms of how they were giving that message out. How were they sharing that information? If they'd have shared it in a way with the media and said, look, this is what we know, but please don't broadcast it, it would have made a massive difference in terms of how the police would have, the media would have reported it. So huge criticism. We're in a very different world now in terms of how media is portrayed. We're in a very different world in terms of the way the police and the media work together. Because one of the criticisms that came out was the fact that Lancashire police, by the very nature of it, failing to put the correct information out, and at times actually lying, giving misinformation, it ruined the trust and the belief that the public have in the police, which is at a critical level anyway. So one hopes now, and I know that I've been in contact with the College of Policing and the Policing Council, that they are now going to take this very much further forward. And we need frontline police officers, we need senior officers, but we also need family liaison officers who are properly trained in how to deal with the media.
Just explain to people what did actually happen to Nicola Bulley, in case the case is a little hazy in their memories, or in case they're thinking, oh yes, that woman that everyone was looking for. What did happen, and what was found to have happened to Nicola in the end?
So what happened is Nicola was out walking her dog, which she would walk very often in the early morning after having dropped the children off at school. She went around a field, and as she walked around the field, she effectively vanished, because what was found was her mobile phone on a bench which was beside the riverbank. The police then became involved. You can see the bench there by the riverbank, and the police became involved and said that there was no footprints on the riverbank, and therefore she must have left in some fashion but not gone into the water. Huge search started, and then they started to try and find out where she was. They searched that area immediately beside the bench. They said she wasn't there, and that continued. 23 days later, eventually her body was found, actually by a member of the public downstream. And there was all kinds of theories that came about. Had she been abducted? Did she fall into the water? Did she take her own life? Ultimately, the inquest ruled that she died as a result of drowning. What we are unclear of, and the police still haven't been able to put any fact behind this, is how did she end up in the water? We still don't know that. Did something happen? Did she fall into the water? Did she, as a result of falling into the water, lose consciousness? We don't know those answers. And this is one of the really sad things, is that very often in critical cases, murder cases, it's the family are left without some of those answers. And to date, of course, the family still don't know. How did she end up in that water? Because the reality is this is a highly educated lady. Why did she need to end up going into that water? And the police would still maintain that she didn't fall down the bank. And the water was very, very slow flowing. So there was no way that she could have been pushed down the bank. Incorrectly, the inquest actually showed a video of a police diver going down the water. Well, that was inaccurate, because actually he was pushing himself down water. It wasn't the water flow that was pushing him down. So we still don't know. This story has created huge, not just national but international attention. The media have covered this around the world, and it still to date attracts huge amounts of attention. As soon as I start tweeting about it or talking about it, the amount of people that have got different theories about what's happened, the sad reality is we don't know some of the answers. And that's bad for us, but you can imagine how bad it is for the family.
A final question, Mark. The overwhelming lesson that you feel that the police must learn from this, something that must not be repeated the next time around?
Oh, well, the very clear position is communicate better, work with the media. The media are very powerful and they can actually get information out very quickly. Be honest, be truthful, don't lie, don't be deceitful, be honest with the media, get that story out quickly, as quickly as you possibly can, and escalate it. You can always backtrack, but if you miss those early hours of the golden hours of securing evidence, you're in trouble. And one of the criticisms that was applied is that they should have treated this as a critical incident. It had all the hallmarks, all the elements of a critical incident, but they failed to deal with it like that. So big lessons for Lancashire Police. And I hope Lancashire Police will fully acknowledge that and come out and go, you know what, we made mistakes. Because what they didn't do at the time is acknowledge anything. They were very clearly criticising the media, criticising other people, but there was no taking responsibility of their own failings. So now, in light of this report by the College of Policing, I hope Lancashire Police will come out and say, do you know what, we did make mistakes, we're sorry.